Namaskar, friends. The disasters out of climate change are becoming very frequent. One may think that this is an aberration. Aberration in English means a departure from what is normal, usual, or expected. However, I like when this article says the title of the article is Redouble Efforts to Reduce Disaster Risks. So, underpinning the words in the article, redouble efforts, our efforts are not enough. The Sustainable Development Goals, which the United Nations time and again have been just reviewing, are not enough. Redoubling efforts is required to reduce disaster risks. Risk is the vulnerability of the disaster and its consequence. Risk is equal to vulnerability into probability. The probability of disaster happening is very high in certain areas, especially in almost all the areas of the world. And then the vulnerability means the consequence of the disaster. So when multiplied by vulnerability, the probability into vulnerability, the disaster risk comes. Disaster management is a very skillful process. We are going to meet United Nations General Assembly Sustainable Development Goals in New York next week. In this backdrop, Miami, Misutori, Kamal Kishore, and Shombi Sharp, who are all with the United Nations National Disaster Management Authority, have written an article. This is Redouble Efforts to Reduce Disaster Risk. What we are contemplating is that disaster prone countries, India is the most disaster prone country now. The rise in disasters. I like this sentence in the newspaper, in the article, quote, the rise in disasters is a trend, not an aberration. As already I have said, aberration is a departure from what is normal. Trend, you know, the meaning of trend, you know. So, what is just culminating is that vulnerable to climate change has made the disasters a trend now. Always we listen. Some parts of the world are deluged with floods. Some parts of the recently in Morocco, last 2 days back, it has been earthquake has struck Morocco like anything, and 1,000 more people have died. Nothing to forget that WTC meeting is scheduled in Morocco next month. United Nations WTC meeting. What this article focuses is that with the G20 summit has ended, disaster risk reduction has been thought about in the G20 summit, and disaster risk reduction working group has been seriously thought about. What we must do is that a 24-hour warning of a coming storm or rain can reduce the damage caused by 30%. The 90% of the disasters recently, for example, Cyclone Biparjoy in Gujarat, the death toll is 0. And there is a joy which is being contributed by this Cyclone Biparjoy. Several children have been, newborn babies have been born in amidst this disaster, because Gujarat government had just removed the probable mothers to the hospital for safety before the cyclone struck. The 15th Finance Commission, the present Finance Commission is the 15th Finance Commission, which allocates funds for the disaster, and it has allocated $28.6 billion for the disaster fund. This is a very encouraging trend, my dear friends. Friends, interestingly, the editorial article is also in on similar lines. The editorial article is titled Stock Taking Calamity. What is this stock taking calamity? Stock taking calamity is global stock take, which was released before the G20 meet. What is this stock taking report about? As per the Paris climate talks, we have a commitment to reduce our temperature by 1 point and limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. We have a commitment to reduce the GHS gas emissions by 43% by 2030, 60% by 2035, and reach zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050 globally. This stock taking, global stock taking, has been resorted to now. The challenges which the major economies of the world like India is facing is being highlighted in this global stock take report, which is the key document which is discussed in this editorial article. Friends, 5.8 to 5.9 trillion has been allocated by G20 leaders declaration for the developing countries to wade over this crisis of climate change. Therefore, the climate talks are going on. The 28th conference of parties is scheduled in Dubai in November, not so far away. This November, the 28th conference of parties is meeting. In discussing greenhouse gas emissions, which we have been always following since 2015, the discussion will be mainly focusing on how far we have progressed towards reducing the temperature to remain it at 1.5 degrees centigrade. Thank you, my dear friends.